One of the most spoken names in recent years in fashion, Balenciaga became a brand. Who was the man who created all these innovative designs? I'm Estela Mendes. Welcome to Fashion History Sessions. Cristóbal Balenciaga was born in 1895 in Getaria, in the Basque Country in northern Spain. His father was a fisherman and his mother a seamstress. When his father died, Cristóbal was still a child and saw his mother supporting the family with a small workshop, where she would take commissions from the wealthy locals, including the Marquesa de Casa Torres, who would be pivotal for the development of his career. Cristóbal's interest for fashion starts at a young age. By growing up in his mother's workshop, he started by making clothes for his dog when he was only 6 years old, but his constant visits to the mansion of the Marquesa Casa Torres would impact him forever. One day, he asked the Marchioness if he could copy one of her dresses, which she agreed to. Later, she wore the creation, which would be the first of many. At the age of 12, Cristóbal started his tailoring apprenticeship at Casa Gomez in San Sebastián. After he completed the apprenticeship, he went to work at Les Grands Magasins du Louvre in San Sebastián, which was a branch of the Parisian department store. These department stores had their own ateliers. When Cristóbal entered this department store, he was 16 years old. He started in the women's workshop as a tailor, but within 2 years, at the age of 18, his geniality came through, and he was promoted to head of dressmaking department. Working for this Parisian department store put him in contact with Parisian Haute Couture, which contributed for Balenciaga's education in the Haute Couture trade, learning the ins and outs of the business from budgeting, promoting, contact with buyers, and presentation of the fashion shows. In 1917, at the age of 22, and after accumulating 4 years of training and 6 years of work experience, Cristóbal Balenciaga went solo, opening his own business in San Sebastián under the name of C. Balenciaga. This is the time of the First World War that had started in 1914. San Sebastián is close to the glamorous Biarritz, where the rich and famous found refuge during the years of war. Balenciaga finds a necessary financial investment for the couture house in the sisters Benita and Daniela Lizazo. Balenciaga immediately attracts the likes of the Queen of Spain, Maria Cristina of Bourbon, and other members of the royal family and the aristocracy. His creations are inspired by Parisian couture, which dictated the fashion at the time, but Balenciaga also introduced his own creations that were mostly tailored to the taste of his local clientele. The more successful he became, more independent his style was. In 1927, he created a new brand, Martina Robes at Manteau. Martina was his mother's name, which later would be renamed as Haute Couture. These clothes were more affordable and in line with the local taste. The profit of this business would finance the more expensive business of haute couture. In 1932, political changes in Spain make Balenciaga shift his business. In April of this year, Spain became a republic. The royal and aristocratic clientele of the haute couture business was on the run. Balenciaga rearranges his business and invests even more in Haute Couture, opening in Madrid and Barcelona. But in 1937, the Spanish Civil War begins and Balenciaga cannot continue. The decision is made, it's time to move to Paris. On the 7th of July 1937, Balenciaga founded his couture house at 10 Avenue Georges V, along with his life partner, Vlasio d'Atonville and Nicolas Biscarrondo. His first Parisian collections caught the attention of the American press, being featured in Vogue as a newcomer to the Parisian haute couture business. The attention in the American press granted him deals with the American department stores like Bergdorf Goodman. Balenciaga's first collections in Paris were very much inspired by costumes of the past. Fashion from the 17th, 18th, and 19th century were an inspiration that we could see in bustles or lace collars. Balenciaga will reinterpret these gowns, modernizing them. He would always be referred as a Spanish couturier. His homeland, particularly the grandmasters like Velázquez and Goya, would profoundly influence his creations. During the war, in which clothes tended to be mostly day wear, Balenciaga continued to innovate in new cuts and tailoring. Due to the Spanish neutrality during the war, Balenciaga continued his business with Aisha. Due to this store, his designs would arrive in New York. Balenciaga begins to gain a reputation in the American fashion press, paving the way for his post-war success. During his time in Spain, Balenciaga would often visit Paris to attend fashion shows. His favorite couturiers were Chanel, Vionnet, Lanvin, and the Calorseurs, all women. These women are at the forefront of the fashion for the new dynamic and independent woman of the 20th century. It's to the house of Marquesa Casa Torres influenced the young Balenciaga. The Belle Epoque with the bustles and corseted waists can be seen in his creations. The young Balenciaga started to observe the artworks at the palace of Marquesa Casa Torres, becoming acquainted with the Spanish grandmasters. Through his life and career, Spanish art is going to play a pivotal role in Balenciaga's creations. Catholicism was a very important part of Spanish culture. Painting and even the architecture of churches and cathedrals would play a role in Balenciaga's designs in the color and shape. The Spanish popular culture would be visible in Balenciaga's fashion, in perfectly embroidered bolero jackets. It seems that the more away he was from Spain, the closer he was from his culture. Post-war creations would be the most innovative and creative. The older Balenciaga was, more daring he would become. He invested his talent in experimentation rather than sticking to a formula that had granted him success. Sooner the press would call him the shape master or the only true couturier. In the 1950s and 60s, we see Balenciaga paying more attention to shape rather than ornament. He starts playing with volume and envelops women's bodies in playful and abstract shapes. In the late 1940s, Christian Dior was propagating the new look, which was a return to the ultra-femininity and the silhouette of the 1850s. He would not be the pioneer of this new style, as Pierre Balmain had also introduced a similar silhouette with his famous Jolie Madame style. Balenciaga decides to go on the opposite direction. Instead of returning to a restrictive dressing for women, Balenciaga believed in the freedom that the 1920s had brought. Balenciaga starts transforming the traditional shapes, preferring the clothes to move with the natural movement of the body. His cocoon coat was an example of that did not have a defined waist and only touched the shoulders, enveloping the body in freedom. This coat was a great success. This cocoon silhouette would be reinvented in dresses as well, leading to the famous tunic dress in 1956 and the sack dress in 1957. But not emphasizing the waist, which is such a characteristic of the Western dressing, Balenciaga is deconstructing the idea of the ideal female body. The baby doll dress would come after and would not change his opinion. This trapezium-shaped dress would not be well received by the press, but it was for sure accepted by the public. Not all clothes were voluminous. Balenciaga was known for his suits that were some of the favorites of the working women. This tailored suit would emphasize the waist, but they had more of a boxy, relaxed shape to it. A Balenciaga suit in the 1950s was the equivalent of the Armani suit in the 1980s, a symbol of success. Though Balenciaga was not focused into making commercial clothes, by 1959 his couture house was the most profitable of all. Admired by all couturiers, Balenciaga started to teach others like Courrèges, Emmanuel Ungaro, and Hubert de Givenchy. Cristóbal Balenciaga was one of the few couturiers of Paris who could design, pattern, cut, and sew his designs. For each collection, there would be one garment that would be totally made by him. In 1968, at the age of 74 and after 30 years in Paris, he decides to close his business and retire in Spain. Cristóbal Balenciaga would die 4 years later in 1972 at the age of 78 years old. Many refer to him as the master of us all. Balenciaga had an incredible talent that could be seen in the technical aspects of constructing a garment, but above all, he was an artist, always seeking a new way of experimenting with his medium and communicating with his art. Balenciaga was at the vanguard of fashion. His willingness to push himself out of the establishment would create modern and daring clothes, so modern that they are still modern today.